what role does the United States, or what role do I, as a human being who has food today, who has shelter, who has a comfortable life, what role do I have when I think about North Korea, when I think about Syria, when I think about maybe the Uyghur population in China?
Well, I mean, the role is the same role I have, which is to teach and to learn and to get the message out that this is happening. Because the more people who understand it, the more likely it is that the United States government will try to do something about it. Within the context of who we are and where we live, right? And so, I write books, you do shows, or maybe you write books too. I don't know. But
I do not write books, but I tweet.
You tweet. Okay, that's good
ineloquently.
too.
But that's not the. I guess that's not the. Yes, so certainly this is true. And in terms of a voice, in terms of words, in terms of books, you are I would say, a rare example of somebody that has powerful reach with words. But I was also referring to actions. The United States government, what are the options here? So war has costs, and war seems to be, as you have described, sort of potentially increase the atrocity, not decrease it. If there's anything that challenges my hope for the future, is the fact that sometimes we're not powerless to help, but very close to powerless to help. Because trying to help can often lead to, in the near term, more negative effects than positive effects.
That's exactly right. I mean, the unintended consequences of what we do can frequently be as bad, if not worse, than, trying to relieve the difficulties that people are having. So I think, you're caught a little bit, but it's also true, I think, that we can be more forceful. I think we can be more forceful without necessarily war. There is this idea of the so-called responsibility to protect. And this was an idea that came up, after Kosovo, which was 1999. And when, the Serbs looked like they were going to engage in a genocidal program in Kosovo. And, it was basically a program of ethnic cleansing, but it could have gone bad and gotten worse, not just driving people out, but beginning to kill them. And the United States and Britain and others intervened, and Russians were there too, as you probably recall. And I think correctly, people have analyzed this as a case in which genocide was prevented or stopped. In other words, the Serbs were stopped in their tracks. I mean, some bad things did happen. We bombed Belgrade and the Chinese embassy and things like that. But, it was stopped. And following upon that, then there was a kind of international consensus that we needed to do something. I mean, because of Rwanda, Bosnia, and the positive example of Kosovo, right? That genocide did not happen in Kosovo. And I think that argument, has been substantiated. Anyway, and this notion of the this doctrine or whatever of the responsibility to protect them was adopted by the UN in 2005 unanimously. And what it says is there's a hierarchy of measures that should be, let me take a step back. It starts with the principle that sovereignty of a country is not, you don't earn it just by being there and being your own country. You have to earn it by protecting your people. So this was all agreed with, all the nations of the UN agreed, Chinese and Russians too, that, sovereignty is there because you protect your people against various depredations, right? Including genocide, crimes against humanity, forced imprisonment, torture, and that sort of thing. If you violate that justification for your sovereignty, that you're protecting your people, that you're not protecting them, the international community has the obligation to do something about it, all right? Now, then they have a kind of hierarchy of things you can do, starting with, I mean, I'm not quoting exactly, but, starting with kind of push and pull, trying to convince people, don't do that, to Myanmar. Don't do that to the Rohingya people, right? Then it goes down the list, and you get to sanctions or threatening sanctions, and then sanctions, like we have against Russia. But you go down the list, right? You go down the list, and eventually you get to military intervention at the bottom, which they say is the last thing, and you really don't want to do that. Mm-hmm. And not only do you not want to do it, but it just as you said, just as you pointed out, it can have unintended consequences, right? And we'll do everything we can short, of military intervention, but, if necessary, that can be undertaken as well. And so the responsibility to protect, I think, is it was not implementable. Oh, one of the things it says in this last category, right, the military intervention, is that the intervention cannot create more damage than it relieves, right? And so for Syria, we came to the conclusion, that, I mean, the international community in some ways said this in so many words, even though the Russians were there, obviously, we ended up being there and that sort of thing. But the international community basically said, there's no way you can intervene in Syria. Mm-hmm. There's just no way without causing more damage, than you would relieve. So, in some senses, that's what the international community is saying about, Xinjiang and the Uyghurs too. I mean, you can't even imagine what hell would break loose if there was some kind of military trouble, to threaten the Chinese with. But you can go down that list with the military leadership of Myanmar, and you can go down that list with the Chinese Communist Party. And you can go down the list, with others who are threatening, with Ethiopia and what it's doing in Tigray. And, you can go down that list and start pushing. I think what happened, there was more of a willingness in the 90s and in right at the turn of the century, to do these kinds of things. And then, when Trump got elected and, he basically said, America first and out of the world, we're not going to do any of this kind of stuff. And now Biden has the problem of trying to rebuild consensus on how you deal with these kinds of things. I think it's not impossible. I mean, here I tend to be maybe more of an optimist than you. I think it's not impossible that the international community can, muster some internal fortitude and push harder, short of war, to get the Chinese and to get the, again, Myanmar and to get others to kind of back off of violations of people's rights the way they are routinely doing it.